The ballroom of Hartington House blazed with the light of 1,000 candles, their flames reflected in crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls above the swirling dancers below. It was the most anticipated event of the London season, the Duchess of Hartington's annual spring ball, where fortunes were made and reputations sealed with a single dance, a whispered word, or a cutting glance. In the shadows of the musicians' gallery, hidden from the glittering assembly below, Lady Alicia Willowby pressed herself against the cold marble pillar and watched the world that had once been hers. She should not have come. She knew this with the certainty of one who had learned hard lessons about the cruelty of society. But her younger sister Charlotte was being presented tonight, making her debut into the very world that had cast Alicia out 3 years ago, and she could not bear to miss it entirely. From her hidden vantage point, she watched Charlotte take her place among the other debutantes, a vision in white silk with roses woven through her golden hair. Their mother stood nearby, resplendent in burgundy velvet, carefully positioning herself so that no one might associate her with her disgraced elder daughter. Alicia felt no bitterness at this. She had accepted long ago that her mother's social survival depended upon maintaining distance from scandal. And Alicia Willowby was a scandal incarnate. The whispers had begun 3 years ago, started by Lord Jacob Collingwood after Alicia had refused his proposal of marriage. She had rejected him as gently as she could, citing a lack of affection and compatibility, but Jacob had not taken the refusal well. Within a fortnight, rumours began circulating through London's drawing rooms. Lady Alicia Willowby, it was said, had been discovered in a compromising position with a married man at Lord Pemberton's country house party. The married man in question, Sir Harold Whitmore, had denied nothing when confronted, finding it easier to let a young woman bear the blame than to admit his own attempted impropriety. His wife, desperate to preserve her marriage, had joined in condemning Alicia. The truth that Sir Harold had cornered Alicia in the library and attempted to force himself upon her, that she had fought him off and fled with her virtue intact, if not her dignity, had never emerged. Who would believe the word of a young woman against that of a respected baronet and his devoted wife? Certainly not the ton, who found scandal far more entertaining than justice. Alicia had been ruined. The invitations stopped coming. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Her engagement to the Earl of Westbrook's son had been quietly dissolved. Her father, unable to bear the shame, had retreated to their country estate and drunk himself into an early grave within the year. Her mother had moved to a modest townhouse with Charlotte, maintaining just enough social standing to give her younger daughter a chance at a respectable future, a chance that required Alicia to remain invisible. So Alicia had retreated to a small cottage on the outskirts of London, living on a modest inheritance from her grandmother, spending her days in charitable work among the poor who did not know or care about society's judgments. She had built a quiet life, one stripped of glamour but not without purpose. She had accepted that love and marriage and happiness were not to be hers. Yet tonight, drawn by sisterly devotion, she had slipped into Hartington House through a servant's entrance, bribed a sympathetic footman for access to the gallery, and now stood watching the life she might have had danced and sparkled below her. Charlotte was dancing her first dance, a quadrille with the youngest Hartington's son. Alicia smiled despite herself, remembering her own debut, the nervous excitement, the heady sensation of possibility that had filled her chest. How naive she had been. How certain that life would unfold according to the rules she had been taught. She was so absorbed in watching her sister that she did not hear the footsteps approaching until a deep voice spoke directly beside her. "You seem to be enjoying the view more than most of the guests below." Alicia startled so violently that she nearly lost her footing on the narrow gallery. A strong hand caught her elbow, steadying her, and she looked up into a face that made her breath catch in her throat. The man before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples and eyes of an unusual amber colour that seemed to glow in the candlelight. His features were striking rather than conventionally handsome, a strong jaw, a nose that had perhaps been broken once, and a mouth that curved with what might have been amusement or curiosity. He wore evening clothes of impeccable cut, but there was something about his bearing that suggested he wore them under protest, like a wild creature forced into civilization's harness. "I apologize for startling you," he continued, releasing her elbow with what seemed like reluctance. "I did not expect to find anyone else seeking refuge up here." Alicia's heart hammered against her ribs. Discovery could mean disaster not for herself, but for Charlotte. If it became known that the disgraced Lady Alicia had attended the Hartington ball, the scandal would splash onto her innocent sister. "I was just leaving," she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should not be here." The stranger tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You are hiding." It was not a question. "Yes." She saw no point in dissembling. "I am not welcome among the guests below." His amber eyes swept over her, taking in her simple grey dress, her hair pinned without ornament, her face bare of the cosmetics that fashionable ladies wore. "Yet you came anyway." "Why?" Alicia glanced back toward the ballroom, where Charlotte was curtsying to her partner as the dance ended. "My sister is making her debut. I could not stay away entirely, even knowing the risk." The stranger moved to stand beside her at the balustrade, his gaze following hers to the dancers below. "Which one is she?" "The one in white with roses in her hair." He was quiet for a moment, watching Charlotte accept the hand of her next partner. "She is lovely. She is good," Alicia corrected softly. "Lovely matters little in the end. Good matters a great deal." The stranger turned to look at her again, his expression thoughtful. "That is an unusual philosophy for a lady of society." "I am not a lady of society," Alicia replied with a bitter smile. "Not anymore." She expected questions then, the probing curiosity that had characterized every encounter since her fall from grace. But the stranger merely nodded, as though her disgrace were of no particular consequence. "I find myself similarly situated," he said. "I am expecting below, but I find the prospect of an evening spent deflecting matchmaking mummers and simpering debutantes profoundly exhausting." Alicia felt a surprised laugh escape her. "You make it sound like torture. Is it not?" His eyebrow arched with dry amusement. "An endless parade of young ladies who agree with every word I say, laugh at remarks that are not remotely amusing, and regard me not as a person but as a prize to be won. I would rather face a charging cavalry regiment. You speak as though from experience." "I was a soldier once," he confirmed. "A long time ago, it seems now. I fought in the wars before circumstances recalled me to a life of drawing rooms and diplomatic dinners. A fate some might consider fortunate, so I am constantly reminded. Yet I find myself envying the simplicity of military life, where a man is judged by his courage and competence rather than his title or fortune." Alicia studied his profile, intrigued despite herself. "You speak of title and fortune as burdens." "That is because they are," he replied simply. "They obscure everything genuine, making authentic connection nearly impossible. Every smile directed at me is calculated, every friendship suspect. I have not had an honest conversation in months until, apparently tonight." He turned to face her fully, something shifting in his expression. "Might I know the name of my fellow refugee from society's demands?" She hesitated. Giving her name would reveal her disgrace and would likely send this interesting stranger retreating as all the others had. But there was something in his eyes, a genuine curiosity unmarked by judgment, that made her reckless. "Alicia Willowby," she said quietly. "Lady Alicia, though the title feels rather hollow these days." She waited for the recognition, the subtle withdrawal. Lord Jacob had made certain that her name was known throughout London as a synonym for scandal. But the stranger's expression did not change. He merely bowed with old-fashioned courtesy. I am Sebastian. Just Sebastian. For this evening, if you will permit me. The irregularity of the introduction should have troubled her, but Alicia found herself oddly charmed by it. Very well, just Sebastian. Though I suspect you are rather more than that. His smile was unexpected, transforming his stern features with warmth. And I suspect you are rather more than society has decided you are. Tell me, Lady Alicia, since we are both hiding from the world tonight, might we hide together? I find your company infinitely preferable to what awaits me below. Alicia knew she should refuse. Every moment she remained increased the risk of discovery, the danger to Charlotte's reputation. But when had she last felt this spark of genuine connection, this sense of being seen as herself rather than as a scandal to be avoided? Just for tonight, she said, the words escaping before caution could catch them. They talked as the hours passed and the music played below them. Alicia learned that Sebastian had travelled extensively, that he had a younger sister he adored, that he found London society stifling after years spent in more genuine pursuits. She shared cautiously at first, and then with growing freedom, her work among the poor, her love of books and philosophy, her quiet life in the cottage where she had found unexpected peace. She did not explain the nature of her disgrace, and he did not ask. It was as though they existed outside of time, outside of society's rules and judgments, two souls meeting in the space between worlds. When the ball began to wind down and the guests started departing, Sebastian walked her to the servants' entrance through which she had come. At the door, he captured her hand and raised it to his lips. "Will I see you again, Lady Alicia?" She shook her head sadly. "I do not move in your world, Sebastian. Tonight was an anomaly, a stolen moment. It cannot be repeated." He held her gaze, something fierce burning in those amber eyes. "I do not accept that. Tell me where I might find you." Alicia hesitated, then gave him the address of her cottage. She did not expect him to come. Men of his obvious station did not pursue disgraced women living in modest circumstances on London's outskirts. But something in her wanted him to know, wanted to leave open the possibility, however remote, that this connection might continue. "Until we meet again, Lady Alicia," he said softly. She slipped out into the night, certain she would never see him again, yet unable to stop herself from hoping she was wrong. 3 days later, Alicia was in her small garden, tending the roses she had coaxed into bloom despite the London soot, when the sound of hooves on cobblestones drew her attention to the lane. A magnificent black horse stood at her gate, and astride it sat Sebastian, looking even more striking in daylight than he had in the candlelit gallery. "Good afternoon, Lady Alicia," he called, swinging down from his mount with athletic grace. "I have come to continue our conversation." Alicia set down her pruning shears, conscious of the dirt on her apron and the wisps of hair escaping from her practical braid. She was not dressed for receiving callers, particularly not callers of Sebastian's evident quality. "You should not be here," she said, even as her heart lifted at the sight of him. "I am exactly where I should be," he countered, tying his horse to the gatepost and walking up the path to stand before her. "I have thought of nothing else since we parted." Alicia shook her head. "You do not know what you risk by associating with me. I told you I am not welcome in society. I have heard the rumours." His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "Lady Alicia Willowby, ruined by scandal 3 years past. Compromised by a married man at a country house party. Cast out from polite society and condemned to live in exile while her family pretends she does not exist." "So you know," she said, her voice flat with the old pain. "I know what people say." He stepped closer. "I also know that gossip rarely contains the whole truth. Will you tell me yours?" No one had asked before. No one had cared to hear her side, to consider that there might be more to the story than society had decided. Alicia felt tears prick at her eyes, years of suppressed grief and anger rising to the surface. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" "Because when I spoke with you that night, I met a woman of intelligence and wit, of dignity and grace. A woman who risks her own safety to watch over a sister she loves, who speaks of goodness mattering more than beauty, who has built a meaningful life in the ruins of the one society took from her. Either the gossip is wrong about you, or my judgment has failed me entirely. And I do not believe my judgment has failed." Alicia stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Come inside," she said finally. "I will tell you what truly happened." They sat in her small parlour, afternoon light streaming through windows that overlooked her garden, and Alicia told Sebastian everything. She spoke of Lord Jacob's proposal and her gentle refusal, of the country house party where Sir Harold had cornered her, of her desperate fight to preserve her virtue and the terrible injustice that had followed. She told him of her father's death, her mother's abandonment, the long years of isolation and shame for a sin she had not committed. Sebastian listened without interruption, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "Why did you never tell the truth publicly?" he asked finally. "Who would have believed me?" Alicia laughed bitterly. "A young woman's word against that of a respected baronet and his wife. I would have been accused of lying to save myself, of dragging an honourable man's name through the mud. The scandal would have grown worse, not better. So I remained silent and allowed them to destroy me, hoping that at least my silence might protect my family from further damage." Sebastian rose from his chair and moved to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. His amber eyes blazed with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lady Alicia," he said formally, "there is something I must tell you. Something I should have revealed that first night, but I was so relieved to be speaking with someone who did not know, who treated me as simply a man, rather than a title." Alicia's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "My name is Sebastian Alexander Charles Montfort." His voice was steady despite the weight of what he was revealing. "I am Crown Prince of Aldoria, and I am in London seeking a bride." Crown Prince. The words echoed in Alicia's mind, refusing to make sense. She had been speaking with, confiding in, developing feelings for a prince. A man so far above her station that even before her disgrace she would not have dared to aspire to his notice. And now, ruined and outcast, she had told him everything. She tried to pull her hands away, but he held firm. "You should not be here," she said urgently. "If anyone sees you, if it becomes known that you have visited a woman of my reputation, the scandal will touch you too. Your future bride, whoever she may be, will be tainted by association. Alicia," his voice was gentle but commanding, "look at me." She raised her eyes to his reluctantly. What she saw there made her heart stutter. "I have met every eligible young lady London has to offer," he said. "I have danced with duchesses and dined with countesses. I have been presented with the cream of European nobility, each one more accomplished and connected than the last. Not one of them has moved me, as you did in a single evening of honest conversation." She shook her head in disbelief. "You cannot mean— I mean that you are worth more than gossip." He spoke the words with quiet conviction. "I mean that the woman society has cast aside is worth more than all the simpering debutantes combined. I mean that I came to London seeking a partner worthy of standing beside me, and I believe I have found her hiding in a musician's gallery, watching over a sister with more love than society deserves. This is madness. Perhaps—" his smile was rueful. "Perhaps love always is. But I find I do not care about propriety or reputation, or what the gossips might say. I care about you, Alicia. I want to know you better, to continue the conversation we began. And if, at the end of that knowing, you feel as I do, I want to make you my princess. Alicia's head spun with the impossibility of it all. Even if I were not ruined, she protested weakly, I am not of sufficient rank to marry a crown prince. Aldorian law requires me to marry someone of noble blood, Sebastian countered. You are the daughter of a viscount. The law is satisfied. As for your reputation, he added with an edge of steel in his voice, that is a wrong that can be righted. She stared at him. What do you mean? I mean that Sir Harold Whitmore's lies have caused enough damage. It is time the truth was known. How? She breathed. Leave that to me. His eyes were fierce with purpose. But first, I need your permission. Do you want the truth to come out, Alicia? Even knowing it will drag everything back into the light, force you to relive the worst moments of your life? For 3 years, Alicia had accepted her fate in silence, protecting her family through her own destruction. The thought of challenging the established narrative, of fighting back against the injustice that had defined her existence, was terrifying. But it was also, she realized, the first real hope she had felt since that terrible country house party. Yes, she whispered, I want the truth to be known. Then truth you shall have. Sebastian raised her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. But until that truth emerges, I ask for your patience. What I intend will take time and careful planning. Can you trust me? Alicia looked into his amber eyes and saw something she had stopped believing existed. Genuine concern for her well-being, steadfast determination to right a terrible wrong, and beneath it all, something that looked remarkably like love. I trust you, she said, and felt the words settle into her heart, like an anchor finding purchase after years of drifting. Sebastian visited her cottage nearly every day in the weeks that followed, always discreetly, always careful to protect her from the prying eyes of society. They talked for hours, discovering shared passions for literature and philosophy, debating politics and ethics with the vigour of matched minds. Alicia learned of his childhood in Aldoria's mountain kingdom, of the weight of responsibility he had borne since his father's death 5 years ago, of his longing for a partner who would share his burdens rather than simply reflect his glory. She told him of her dreams before the scandal, of the woman she had been and the woman she had become, of the unexpected gifts she had found in her exile. She spoke of the children she taught to read in the charity school, of the elderly poor she visited with baskets of food and medicine, of the purpose she had discovered in serving those overlooked by society. You have built something meaningful from the ruins, Sebastian observed one afternoon as they walked in her garden. Most would have succumbed to bitterness and despair. What would be the point of that? Alicia asked. Bitterness only poisons the person who carries it. I chose to find purpose where I could, to make my life matter even if society had decided it did not. He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. When we are married, he said. Not if, but when. I want to bring that purpose with you. Aldoria needs hospitals and schools, charitable works that serve all citizens rather than just the wealthy. I want you beside me in building a better kingdom. Alicia's heart swelled at his words, at the future he painted so vividly. But fear still held her back. We do not know yet if the truth can be established, she cautioned. If Sir Harold's lies cannot be disproven, I remain unsuitable as a royal bride. Sebastian's jaw set with determination. The truth will emerge. I have made certain of it. What have you done? She asked with sudden alarm. What I should have done from the beginning. He took her hands in his. I have hired investigators to examine Sir Harold Whitmore's past. It seems you were not his first victim, Alicia. There have been others. Women who were silenced by threats or payments, whose stories were never told. Alicia felt the blood drain from her face. Others? 3 that my investigators have found so far, Sebastian confirmed grimly. And more importantly, one of his victims is willing to speak. A former housemaid who was dismissed after refusing his advances. She has nothing to lose, and a great deal of anger to fuel her. Her testimony, combined with the patterns my investigators have documented, will be enough to destroy Whitmore's credibility entirely. Tears spilled down Alicia's cheeks. For 3 years she had believed herself alone in her suffering, isolated in a battle no one would help her fight. To learn that others had endured the same treatment, that Sir Harold's predation was a pattern rather than an isolated incident, filled her with both grief and fierce vindication. "There is more," Sebastian continued gently. "Lord Jacob Collingwood, the man who started the rumours after you rejected his proposal. He has accumulated significant gambling debts in recent years. It appears he might be amenable to telling the truth about his role in spreading lies, if properly motivated." Alicia shook her head in wonder. "You have done all this for me?" "I have done this for justice," Sebastian replied. "And yes, for you. Because you deserve to walk in the sunlight again, Alicia. You deserve to hold your head high and look your accusers in the eye. You deserve to be recognized for the remarkable woman you are, not condemned for crimes you never committed." She could not speak. The emotions swelling in her chest were too vast for words. So instead she reached up and cupped his face in her hands, drawing him down for a kiss that said everything her voice could not. It was their first kiss, gentle and tentative, a question and an answer, all at once. When they parted, Sebastian's eyes were bright with emotion. "I love you," he said simply. "I love your courage and your kindness, your intelligence and your grace. I love the woman society tried to destroy and failed because she was too strong, too good to be broken by their cruelty." Alicia felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of joy rather than grief. "I love you too," she whispered. "Heaven help me. I love you too." The scandal broke 3 weeks later, orchestrated with surgical precision by Sebastian's agents. The story appeared simultaneously in every major London newspaper, a devastating exposé of Sir Harold Whitmore's decades of predatory behaviour toward women in his household and social circle. The former housemaid's testimony was damning, supported by 2 other women who had come forward once they learned they were not alone. Lord Jacob Collingwood, faced with the prospect of his gambling debts being called in, or his role in spreading lies being exposed, chose to confess. His written statement, published alongside the exposé, admitted that he had invented the story of Alicia's compromise out of spite after she rejected his proposal. Sir Harold, he revealed, had been all too happy to play along, using the false rumours to deflect attention from his own attempted assault. The Ton was in an uproar. Sir Harold Whitmore fled London within days, his reputation shattered beyond repair. His wife, faced with incontrovertible evidence of her husband's true nature, withdrew from society entirely. Lord Jacob Collingwood became a pariah, shunned by the same social circles he had once used as weapons against innocent women, and Lady Alicia Willowby was vindicated. The invitations began arriving at her cottage within a week, tentative overtures from hostesses who had once cut her dead in the street. Former friends sent apologetic letters, begging forgiveness for their years of silence. Her mother arrived in tears, embracing her for the first time since the scandal broke, sobbing apologies for the distance she had maintained. Charlotte came too, radiant with joy at her sister's restoration. "I always knew you were innocent," Charlotte declared, holding Alicia tightly. "I never believed those terrible lies." Alicia accepted the reconciliation graciously, though she could not quite forget the years of silence, the loneliness of her exile. She understood that her family had done what they felt necessary to survive, but the scars remained. She would forgive, but she would not forget the lessons she had learned about the fragility of society's regard. Sebastian made his formal proposal 1 month after the truth emerged, presenting himself at Alicia's cottage with a bouquet of roses from her own garden and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "Lady Alicia Willowby," he said, kneeling before her in the same parlour where she had first told him her story. You have shown me what true strength looks like. You have taught me that worth is not measured in reputation or rank, but in the quality of one's character. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, my princess, my partner in all things?" Alicia looked at the man who had seen her at her lowest and loved her anyway, who had fought for her honor when no one else would, who offered her not just his heart, but a future of purpose and meaning. "Yes," she said, her voice steady with certainty. "Yes, Sebastian, I will marry you." Their engagement was announced in the same newspapers that had once carried the stories of her disgrace, and if London society was shocked by the match, they were wise enough to keep their opinions to themselves. The Crown Prince of Aldoria had chosen, and his choice was not to be questioned. The wedding took place 3 months later in Aldoria's ancient cathedral, a ceremony of breathtaking splendor that drew dignitaries from across Europe. Alicia walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, her mother and Charlotte watching from the front pew, tears of joy streaming down their faces. Sebastian waited at the altar, resplendent in the ceremonial uniform of Aldoria's royal house, his amber eyes bright with love as he watched his bride approach. The people of Aldoria had embraced Alicia from the moment she arrived in their kingdom. The story of her unjust disgrace and spectacular vindication had captured their imagination, and her history of charitable work among the poor had earned their deep respect. She was, they declared, a princess of the people, one who understood suffering because she had experienced it herself. In the years that followed, Alicia devoted herself to the causes she had championed in her exile, establishing schools and hospitals throughout the kingdom, creating programs to support women who had been victimized and silenced as she once was. Sebastian supported her in everything, a true partner who shared her vision of a more just and compassionate society. They had 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son, raising them to value kindness over status and truth over convenience. Alicia taught them that reputation was a fragile thing, easily destroyed by lies and just as easily restored by truth, and that the true measure of a person lay not in what others said about them, but in how they treated those with less power than themselves. Sometimes late at night when the palace was quiet and the children were sleeping, Alicia would stand at her window and remember the woman she had been, hiding in a musician's gallery, watching a world that had cast her out. She would remember the loneliness, the shame, the years of silence and exile. And then Sebastian would come to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple, and she would remember too how love had found her in the most unlikely of places, how truth had ultimately prevailed, how a prince had looked past gossip and scandal to see the woman beneath. "You are thinking deep thoughts, my love," Sebastian murmured one such night. "I am thinking of how far we have come," Alicia replied softly. "Of the woman I was and the woman I have become. Any regrets?" "Only that it took so long to find happiness." She turned in his arms to face him. "But perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps I needed those years of exile to become the person worthy of this life. You were always worthy." His voice was fierce with conviction. Society was simply too blind to see it. She smiled, reaching up to touch his face with the same wonder she had felt that first night in the gallery. "And you saw me. I saw you," he confirmed. "The truest thing I have ever done was look past the whispers to find the remarkable woman they tried to hide." Alicia rose on her toes to kiss him, marveling as she always did at the gift of his love, his faith, his unwavering belief in her worth. The gossips had tried to destroy her, but in the end, their cruelty had led her to something far greater than the conventional life she had once expected. It had led her to Sebastian, to purpose, to a happiness deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. And that, she reflected, as her husband held her close in the silver moonlight, was worth more than any reputation society could bestow or destroy. Dear listener, Alicia's journey reminds us of something we so often forget in a world obsessed with what others think of us. Our worth is never determined by gossip or rumour, by the opinions of those who do not truly know us, or by the judgments of a society that values appearance over substance. Alicia was the same woman before her vindication as she was after. Her character did not change when the truth emerged. She had always been brave, kind, intelligent, and good. What changed was simply that the world finally saw what had been true all along. Perhaps you too have felt the sting of unfair judgment, the weight of others' opinions pressing down on your shoulders. Perhaps you have been dismissed or underestimated, your true worth hidden behind circumstances beyond your control. Take heart from Alicia's story. The truth has a way of emerging, sometimes through dramatic revelation, sometimes through the quiet accumulation of a life well lived. And in the meantime, your worth remains unchanged, whether the world recognizes it or not. The right people, the ones who truly matter, will see you as you are. They will look past the gossip and the whispers to find the remarkable person beneath. And when they do, the connection you forge will be built on something far stronger than reputation. It will be built on truth. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of this story. We hope Alicia and Sebastian's journey reminded you that your worth is never defined by what others say about you, and that love finds us when we least expect it, often in the most unlikely of places. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Your support helps us continue creating stories of love, redemption, and hope. With love, the Courting Tales team.